So I heard on this morning's talkback that Grant Robertson has said it's time for us to diversify our income away from international students, and with tourism effectively decommissioned by COVID-19, Minister for Regional Development Shane Jones says it was not time to impose further regulation on our other major export earner, of course the agricultural sector. He joins me now. Shane, how has your conversations been in the last week or two with Minister David Parker on the effectively another whack with the onslaught of the release of freshwater and biodiversity reforms?
Well, the New Zealand First Caucus is very solid on this issue. However, we want to work constructively as a part of our coalition government with colleagues who have responsibility. I would say to you, it's not only water-based regulations. There's also a host of marine-based regulations. And given that we're likely to have 15% of our population looking for jobs, we're going to have to pare back the types of regulations we would have considered appropriate in a time of bountifulness, but that's not what we're looking at.
Okay, before we get into some of these proposals and programs that are currently underway and sort of where the status of them is going to lie, rural media. There has been a bit of a change in the support with a cabinet meeting yesterday, underlying that rural media is actually now an essential service if it isn't daily. What's the general feeling been about that in both the New Zealand First caucus as well as cabinet?
Well, obviously I can't divulge what happens in cabinet, but the New Zealand First caucus were onto this issue within a nanosecond. That's the first thing. The second thing, I grew up in Awanui near Kaitaia. So when I was contacted by Mr. Peter Jackson, the long-standing editor of the Northland Age, a veritable institution in our community in the far north, he was virtually in tears. I sprung into action immediately. I do think that in rural New Zealand, we're going to have to re-establish and recapitalise so much about rural New Zealand that has fallen by the wayside. No more epithets such as the Shabeel, the economist who derided rural New Zealand as zombie towns. Those days are over. Up to $17, $20 billion of international revenue associated with tourism and international students is all vaporised. The only way we're going to replace that income is by expanding our industry, our manufacturing, and to do that, we cannot go forward with constantly sidelining or marginalising the concerns of rural New Zealand. And coming from a farm, being born and bred in Awanui, that's the blood that courses through my body.
What about programs like your 1 Billion Trees program, converting a lot of farmland into forestry with a forestry industry in crisis?
Well, let's just talk about forestry for a moment. Gone are the days where forest owners will rule the roost in terms of the forest industry. The forest industry is going to be a candidate for Crown intervention in terms of expanding and developing the processing and manufacturing capacity, because that's where we'll create jobs. That's where it's important in provincial New Zealand to add value. Now, historically, the power of the forest owners group, up to, I think, 75% of all the forests in New Zealand are owned by international investors. The social license of international investors in forestry has just changed radically. And I'll be able to comment more on that after officials have done us work. I'm prepared to take on the chin that whilst planting trees will absorb a lot of labour, we were already moving towards recalibrating and getting a better balance between which land should go into trees and which should stay in food production. I would say, however, that much of the forestry estate that we now treat as a national economic treasure was actually developed in Depression times. But it is not owned by New Zealanders anymore. It is predominantly owned by foreign owners. Those owners must now redirect their efforts to help turn around the fortunes of the New Zealand economy. They cannot operate purely as wealth machines for distant foreign pension funds.
Are you likely to take on the chin the comment of calling farmers rednecks?
Well, given that I'm the son of a farmer and a school teacher, the grandson of farmers, they know as well as I do. I'm the sort of guy that if you come to Parliament and you want to have a swing at me and use pretty crude language, I'm going to give it straight back to you. But that's now all in the past. Cockies know that the wind blows in the morning and it's peaceful in the evening, and then another wind blows tomorrow.
They certainly do, and we have a lot of expectations more so on them. Shane, going into this 2020 election, firstly, is it likely to be postponed?
Look, I can't comment. There's some constitutional and legal considerations that is exclusively at the level of the Prime Minister. So I can't add anything of value to that question.
What about New Zealand First's campaigning?
Yeah, I think that this is a dynamic situation, and I've already heard some soothsayers in the Fourth Estate. They themselves are a modern form of sort of medicine men, saying that New Zealand First will be a casualty in the recovery. It's quite the opposite. The DNA of New Zealand First is pro-industry. It is the provinces, and we're proud to have been associated with attacking and seeking a greater level of moderation in immigration. That problem's now well and truly taken care of, given that it's highly unlikely that we're going to see the international borders reopened in the short to medium term.
So, what do you think? Minister Jones has thrown his 100% support behind the agricultural industry, and the discussions going on there about the freshwater and biodiversity reforms that were likely to be announced in April, May, seem to be now pushed back. So that's a bit of breathing room so that we can concentrate on what's ahead, which is very much, of course, changing every week.
This is Sarah's Country.